Hey mate, before you enjoy today's episode, I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about the free 14-day transformation that we are currently running inside of the Unbreakable Man team. Now, if you're a man on the Gold Coast who's serious about improving his physical and mental health, building his self-confidence, and you want to become a part of a team of motivated and like-minded men, then this is the best chance that you are going to get. So as part of the 14-day transformation, you're going to get a personalized meal plan and a recipe cookbook to help you get your diet under control. You're going to be training with myself and the Unbreakable Man team for 2 whole weeks, and I'll be there by your side, helping you overcome any of the challenges that you will face along the way. If that sounds good, then get in touch with me by emailing me at mitch@unbreakableman.com.au. You can find all of my contact details on the website, which is just www.unbreakableman.com.au. Or you can message me on social media. Instagram is unbreakableman_challenge, and Facebook is just Unbreakable Man. That sounds good to you? Hit me up. I hope to hear from you soon. Back to the episode. What's up, brother? Coach Mitch here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Unbreakable Man podcast. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about a topic that I've previously discussed in a Facebook Live video that I did, and it's called the comparison game. And the question is, should we be comparing ourselves to others? Now, this topic broadly gets a lot of negative press these days, especially in this era of social media where everyone, like if you're on social media a lot, then you're constantly seeing people's highlight reels of their lives, of all the things they get up to, of the things that they have and their talents and all this sort of stuff. And as a human being, we all have a little mechanism in our brain where we can't help but compare ourselves to someone else or someone else's results. And one of the things that we've seen since the advent of things like social media, which has magnified the effect of that little mechanism that we have in our brain, because we're constantly seeing all these things that other people are up to. And also, we got to remember as well that what we see there is just all the best stuff, right? And so our perception of what's happening in someone else's life is just the best stuff, even though we obviously never see the whole picture. But the point is, since that has become a part of society, we've seen a rise in the rates of anxiety and depression as we naturally, with our human brain, make those comparisons. And so it seems like we've recognized this, and we start to remind ourselves that, making a comparison is something that's not good for us. Making a comparison is the reason why, we might be feeling anxious or depressed when we, compare ourselves unfavorably to somebody else. And look, that is definitely true. Like the stats are in. We can see that a lot of the times when we compare ourselves to others, it tends to have a negative impact on us, because we tend to notice what's wrong a lot more easily and quickly than we notice what's right. Problems seem to illuminate themselves, and the things that we do well, or our gifts and the areas of our life that we are excelling in, tend to dim a little bit. And it's just a part of the human brain. That's what we do. We are designed to locate the problem and focus on it until we find a solution. It's just part of what the kind of animal that we are at the end of the day. Now, in saying that though, that mechanism obviously doesn't always lead us in the direction that we want to go in. That mechanism doesn't always help us and make our situation better, especially if it's affecting our mental health. And so one of the things that I always think about, especially with this particular topic, is that we need to find a balance in there, because as much as we can tell that making comparisons can be quite detrimental to our opinion of ourselves and our mental health, we also need to make comparisons. Like, there's a good reason why that mechanism exists in our minds. Because without comparison, we don't know, like, that's how we learn. We learn by comparing. We learned how to walk by comparing the way that we were moving when we were crawling around as babies to the adults who are standing on 2 feet walking around us. And because we had that example, we realized that, hey, that's something that I need to do as well. And as a result, basically everyone in the world walks. So comparisons are not necessarily a bad thing. That's something that I think we always need to kind of come back to. And one of the things that perhaps we see a lot in today's society is we're very black and white. We're very either something is all bad or it's all good, and it's very rarely the case. One of the things I've learned from jiu-jitsu is that usually the best way to be lies somewhere in between all or nothing. Usually the best way is somewhere in between. It might not be right in the middle, who knows. However, there's a mix of both things because we need to make comparisons. We need to make comparisons to make progress, because there are other people out there setting the example that we need to learn from to get to a similar level. And without making a comparison, we can't make that change. So in that instance, making a comparison is not only positive, but it's also necessary. It's necessary for our progress. So I suppose the goal here, and the goal really with anything, especially when, it's not black or white, it's somewhere in the middle, is how do we manage the downside effects of doing something whilst also maximizing the upside potential, right? We want to make comparisons that improve our lives. We want to make comparisons that help us learn and grow and improve and excel in the areas that we're interested in. And we want to make fewer comparisons that make us feel bad. And we want to make fewer comparisons that create a sense of anxiety and depression in our lives. And look, I think that one of the best things you could do, especially we talked about social media at the start of this, and the beautiful thing about social media is that you get to curate it. It's actually your news feed. It's your profile. The people you follow is your choice, whether you follow those people or not. So what I do with my own personal social media, because it's something that I look at frequently because my business is online, is I make decisions on what I allow to be on my screen based on whether it's helping me improve myself. For example, I've got a lot of jiu-jitsu content on there because I want to be better at jiu-jitsu. So I'll watch the videos and make comparisons between their skills and my skills to learn and improve. However, if I have someone on there just as an example, you might look at someone who's, they've got a mansion or they've got a nice car or they're splashing the cash all over the place, and you look at their life and go, that looks like so much fun, and my life is, boring. You might have that experience. If someone makes you feel like that on your social media, firstly, don't follow them unless you find that kind of content inspiring, unless that's sort of like, something that drives you to, hey, look, I want to have a life like that person. And that's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It's not up to me to decide what's gonna push you and what's gonna hold you back. That your personality is gonna determine what you feel is inspiring and what's deflating. So, but you might, whatever it is, if there's someone that you are following or there's certain content that comes up on your social media feed that creates that feeling of, damn, I look like shit compared to that person, then remove those kinds of things from your life. Especially the ones that you have control over, like you do on your social media. Obviously, if you're out and about and you're seeing, let's say you go to the gym and, you're a bit overweight, you've just started, you're not very strong, and you're around people who are obviously in great shape. You can't change that. It's not your gym. You can't just kick everyone else out. You have to be in that environment. And, but maybe you just want to work out at home then, so that you can start to build that confidence in yourself before you go and enter an environment like that, as long as you're actually doing the work. But that's probably a good example to maybe go a little deeper on. Obviously, I work a lot on people's health and fitness and physical strength and, get rid of body fat and all that sort of stuff. And man, there's probably a lot of people who don't go to the gym because it reminds them that they're not in good shape. It reminds them that, they're not very fit or they're not very strong. And as a result of making that comparison, they actually inhibit themselves from getting fitter, from getting stronger, from being in an environment where you're surrounded by other people that are in good shape and who are active and stuff. Because one of the things that is good about going to a gym is that, okay, maybe you're not that good at some of the gym exercises. Maybe you're brand new. However, you're in an environment surrounded by other people who are also working out. And here's the thing, no one cares about your workout. They care about their workout. Even if you feel a bit self-conscious in that environment because you're not as strong as the next bloke, guaranteed, no one else is thinking about how strong you are, how fit or unfit you are. They're focused on themselves, and it's up to us to remember that, especially when we are making those kind of comparisons where we're feeling self-conscious because we're surrounded by other people who are objectively better at us at that thing. First of all, they aren't watching you and they don't care what's going on in your world. They're focused on themselves. And secondly, anyone who is watching you and is more interested in what's going on in your world than their world and is putting you down as a result of that, trust me, man, that person has some serious issues. And it's not actually you who should be ashamed, it's them. Because the desire to compare yourself favorably to someone else so that you can feel better about yourself is a very weak thing to do. And that's something we can also go on to as well, because that's still a comparison, right? If you like to look at other people who aren't as good as you are at certain things so that you can feel better about yourself, that doesn't make you necessarily a bad person, because once again, it's just a very human thing to do. It's part of our makeup. But you should recognize that that's not good. Not only is it not good morally, but it also doesn't say much about your own personal confidence in yourself. Because if you need to feel like you're better than somebody else in order to feel good about yourself, then you probably actually don't feel that good about yourself. And maybe there's some insecurities that you need to work on. And it would make your life a lot better, because maybe you're making the comparison with people who are better than you, so you feel shit, so then you make yourself feel better by comparing yourself with people who aren't as good as you. And you actually are just repeating this cycle that is already making you feel bad. So, anyone, if you are feeling a bit self-conscious because you're making those comparisons and someone actually is putting you down, genuinely, then just remember, man, that they're the one that has a comparison issue and not you. And if you just focus on yourself, you're in an environment where those things that you are insecure about, maybe you're not as fit as you want to be, or you're not as strong as you want to be, whatever the problem is, they'll get better because you're in an environment where you're actually improving those situations. So in that particular circumstance, making the comparison game and having that be the reason why you don't train, for example, obviously that's negatively impacting your health. And you've got to remember, or remind yourself of the fact that, firstly, people aren't watching you work out, man. They don't really care what's going on in your world. They're focused on themselves. And secondly, anyone who was to be doing that isn't worth the effort. They're the one with the problem and not you. And you just remember that the main person that we should be comparing ourselves to, the main person, is our past self. It doesn't matter how your bench press compares to Johnny's bench press, or how your car compares to Bob's car, or house to Sam's house. Doesn't fucking matter. What really matters is that, in each of those situations, okay, well, what were you lifting before? Is what you're lifting today better than that? Great, well, you're making progress. How did you feel about yourself in the past? Oh, okay, you're happier and more confident than you used to be. great, you're making progress. You are moving forwards and you actually compare favorably to your old self. Now, one of the issues you could have is you look at your old self and you're not as good as you used to be. You've let yourself slide, and okay, look, that's hard. That's a difficult thing to admit. However, that is the only real comparison that we can make, is to ourselves, to our former selves, because that's the only other person who's been through exactly the same life that you've been through. That's the only other person where the comparison is apples to apples or oranges to oranges, Like, you might make a comparison between yourself and some other bloke at the gym or at work or wherever. And, maybe you look good or bad compared to that guy. It doesn't really matter. But the fact of the matter is that you and that other person are completely separate human beings who have lived completely separate lives, who have completely different upbringings, who have learned different things throughout their life. You can't compare yourself to that other person because you're not the same. The only person we can really compare ourselves to is our past self. How do we stack up to where we used to be? And if we stack up favorably compared to that person, then we're doing everything that we should be doing right now. And we ought to continue to do that. And another thing that's really worth pointing out, and I think it was Kobe Bryant that said this, and he was talking about, people were asking him, how do you get so good? Like, who is it that you're trying to beat? And he said that the only person I'm ever trying to beat is myself. Because if I go and try to beat somebody else, then their best is always where I'm going to set my limit. Because if I can just get a little bit better than their best, then I've beaten them. But then I don't grow from there unless their best gets better. And so by competing with yourself, with your past self, and continuously building on what you've already done, the sky is the limit for you, my friend. And that is the comparison game that you ultimately want to play. You start out by using other people's results to learn from and start to apply in your own life. And then once you start to become your own person, then the only person you can compete with in a way that makes sense anymore truly is going to be your past self. So I don't think that making comparisons is necessarily a bad thing at all. It's not a black or white conversation. It's somewhere in the middle. And I think that ultimately what it comes down to is this comparison that I'm making my life worse or making my life better? If it's making my life better, then I'm going to keep making that comparison. But if it's making me feel worse about myself, or it's making me a worse person, then I'm going to stop making that comparison. And I'm going to focus on making the comparisons that continue to improve my life, like help me learn new skills, or help me improve on my past self. And if I'm doing that, then I'm playing the comparison game perfectly. So remove the comparisons from your life that get you feeling down about yourself. Remove those things that make you feel unworthy, make you feel like giving up. And it doesn't mean that you can't be driven by that, as long as it's making you feel, as long as the feeling that you have is positive along the way, right? Because there's lots of people out there who are driven by their insecurity to want to be better, and whilst they get better, the underlying insecurity never really gets resolved because they've not addressed the insecurity, they've just addressed the surface level of it because they're always making those comparisons. And it's only really once you become accepting of yourself and who you are, do you get the opportunity to not mind what other people are doing or what results other people are getting. Like, don't get me wrong, you still learn from them, you're still happy for those people. However, it doesn't have any bearing on how you feel about yourself anymore. And so, if you can continue to make those comparisons that are helping you, and you can remove the ones from your life that only have a negative impact on you, then you're playing the comparison game perfectly. Now, with that said, brother, if you have anything you'd like to add or any questions that you might have around this particular topic, you can comment those down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And I will speak to you again on the next episode. Cheers.
Hey mate, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Unbreakable Man podcast. If you did, it would be absolutely fantastic if you could leave us a 5-star review, because that's going to help us get our message in front of more men who need to hear it. Now, if you have some feedback for me, I'd love to hear that too. Comment down below. And if you just need some mini doses of Unbreakable Man motivation throughout your week, then you can follow us across all social platforms. On Facebook, it's Unbreakable Man Challenge. On Instagram, it's Unbreakable Man_challenge. And on TikTok and YouTube, it's just Unbreakable Man. Your support would be absolutely invaluable. Now, last but not least, do not forget, men aren't born, they're built.